There's a real air of excitement and anticipation here in Galway Corinthians Clubhouse out in Clonacony, because today sees the official unveiling of Sherry FitzGerald as sponsors of Corinthians Youth Rugby on an initial term of 3 years, and who knows what happens after that. But I am absolutely delighted and honoured to be joined by Stephen McKenna, CEO of Sherry FitzGerald. Tony Kavanagh is also here, and representing Galway Corinthians is Kieran Brown. And Stephen, I'll start with yourself. I'm actually looking at notes here, and you're making me jealous, just such as your rugby prowess. But you actually have a background with Corinthians Rugby Club.
Yes, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here. The background for me was I came out here when I was under 14s back in around 1990, and my mum dropped me out here. I remember Stuart Baker out in the car park of Corinthians welcoming me into the club, and there was about 150 kids scrambling around the place and chasing each other across the pitch, and some really good memories. Came up through the underage and made it into the senior team as well, right up until 2004. So it's 14 years playing with Corinthians.
It's great, and if I can then use that, I suppose, as a great example of someone giving something back, because you actually have the experience of youth rugby at Corinthians, and now you're looking after the sponsorship of it for an initial 3 years. So it is a case of almost giving something back to the club and also to the province, because of course you've got an experience with playing with Connacht as well. You played up to 2001 under Glenn Ross. You have an Irish cap as well. I must mention that, by the way, just to mention, he was capped for Ireland with the Irish colleges against the English universities in Oxford. It's like playing the England senior team in Twickenham. I mean, it's that kind of prestige that goes with a game like that. So, through your rugby background, I suppose it's the case that you never really forgot where you came from, and you never forgot the home basis of where you learnt your game.
Absolutely. I mean, I learnt the game in Corinthians while I was in the Bishan school. Corinthians was the club who really taught me how to play the game, and it was the volunteers, the coaches, like Brownie here with me today, who really taught me the skills of the game. I was fortunate enough to play with the Connacht schools from under 16s and 18s and get trials with the Irish schools, trials to the under 21 squad, and I had that one and only cap against the English universities, which was about 1999. A great moment. My dad was there in Oxford University to be there with me, but all of that was thanks to Galway Corinthians. I think now in a career mode with Sherry FitzGerald, in Sherry FitzGerald, it's not just about property, it's about people. We have 96 offices around the country, and we're very involved at a local level with all communities. And for us, it's about giving back and being involved. And it's very proud for me to be in a position now to be able to give back to Corinthians, because I owe them a debt of gratitude in terms of what they did for me growing up, and all the great memories that I have within the club. Actually,
speaking of which, and I want to talk about the business as well on a more national level in a moment, but I want to talk for a local perspective. Tony, I'll bring you in, Tony Kavanagh. The one thing about it is, and we are seeing this now, for Sherry FitzGerald to be involved with a Galway club, from a Galway perspective for yourself, Corinthians perspective from yourself, it must be incredibly satisfying to see something like this over the line and finally in place.
Yeah, very, very much so, John. We're delighted to be involved, because Corinthians are they're the heart and soul of the community, and you can see out here this morning the number of kids on the playing pitches and the volunteer effort that goes in there with parents and coaches, and the buzz of activity that's around here. We love to support that, as Stephen said. We work in the local community, we do our business in the local community, and we want to give back in and work with the people who are doing the work on the ground. And as Stephen says, like the skills he learned on the playing pitches here in Clonacony, I think are standing in great stead. He's a young man, and he's got to the top of our tree, and I think he learned a lot of those skills, I'd say, here, and the discipline and the tenacity and working with teams and all of that. So we'd love to do our little bit to see other young men and ladies coming through in that regard.
And actually, that is a very good point, that the skills you learn on a rugby pitch are not always sporting skills, they're life skills. So it is those skills that you carry on through your school days and towards college if you decide to go, and ultimately into employment. If I may pair it with what Sherry FitzGerald do in the business world and the line of property and what goes with that, that's also very much part and parcel of what you do, especially in Galway.
Yeah, very much so. Like we're in Galway, we were the first office outside of the Greater Dublin area. We're the first regional office to open, and we're in our 21st year now. It's like we have core values in our company: team, tenacity, talent, and what's the fifth one? Or the fourth one? Trust. Sorry. And it's exactly that. Like we're you know, you learn that on playing pitches, literally, and you know, that carries through into all of our life skills. And as I said, I think Stephen is a classic example of it. You know, so and I think we want to we see that with our own people who work with us and who develop our business every day of the week. And most of us are parents and that as well. So we've kids involved in various different sports. So we just want to see what we can do to give a little bit back in from we're making our living in the community. So we want to give back in there, basically.
Yeah, and it's that you know, obviously they use the term a rising tide, you know, raises all boats. But just as Tony and you mentioned, Stephen, about the core values, you know, it's been a very, very difficult time, especially in your line of business over the past 20 years. The fact that you've survived and the fact that you've grown is a pure sign of those core values being put into place, and that's the reason why people come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're as involved in a community as much as Sherry FitzGerald is on a national level, there's a lot of loyalty and trust that's established within that, and that's core to a lot of businesses and the sustainability of those businesses within communities. I think probably at the core of Sherry FitzGerald is that innovation as well. Over the years, we've shown different ways in terms of how we've differentiated ourselves. We've operated in the London market. We introduced the myhome.e platform as well back in the day, and more recently in October we launched our My Sherry Fitz platform, which is a digital platform that gives access to buyers and vendors to live information 24/7 on transactions on their property, and it's much more transparent, and I suppose it's that type of innovation that keeps people coming back.
I'm now going to speak to Kieran Brown, because Kieran, this is something that has been in the pipeline. I hate using buzzwords, but it is something that sticks in my head, because this is something that's been on the go for quite a while. It's finally nailed down, and it must be incredibly satisfying for you as well to see, you know, Stephen and Tony here on what is a very momentous day, because of course we've got a lot of things happening today here in Corinthians, but this is something that is vitally important, and it also secures the future. Now, not that it was ever in doubt, but it really does mean you can now push on with confidence for the next 3 years.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have Sherry FitzGerald and Steve and Tony on board with us here. I suppose this really started the year before last, in my year of presidency, that Steve and a bunch of lads he played rugby with here, in fairness, and they came out to honour me as president in Corinthians and have a reunion. I think it was 21 years since they played. Even back then he was part of a very successful team that the under-18 side and under-20 side that time won the double-double, and it was fantastic. They're a really great bunch of guys, and it just shows the character of Steve and the guys that were there that time, that I think there was 25 of the 32 lads turned up that day. They're a fantastic bunch. They still regularly keep in contact, which is great, and that just shows what the body of rugby does for young lads, and to see 25 of those guys still very friendly, and I mean very friendly, that to meet on a regular basis. But they grew that friendship and partnership out of Corinthians Rugby Club and out of the bonds they made back in that day.
And long may it continue. I remember that night, by the way. That was a fantastic night down in Busker Browns. Just before I wrap up, though, Kieran, this now means the future, as I mentioned, was secure. So obviously plans will be in place. We've already seen over this last couple of weekends, we've had teams in league finals, we've had teams in cup, involved in the opening rounds of the cup and being successful. The girls at under 16 level, a team that's close to your own heart, had a fantastic win last weekend, and they're now moving on the next round. And ladies rugby or women in rugby, I want to use that, I hate the term ladies rugby, women in rugby, is really growing here. it's a sure sign that the club is going forward. And John Fitzmaurice is to your left, and I want to acknowledge John because, of course, he's last season's club personality of the year, but also the amount of work he has done at underage level and youth level as well. So it's all good, to use that rather silly term, but it's all good.
Yeah, it's fantastic here. Like, you can see here this morning the amount of underage that are out here. There's up on 200 lads here this morning, which I would say in the region of about 30 coaches out here coaching them. That's on a Saturday morning with the minis. Our youth section, we have teams from under 13 up to under 18 and a half as in the lads section, and we've over the last 3 years we've started and are developing a girls team out here, and they've gone from strength to strength really, from under 14s to under 16s, and we're moving up to under 18s next year. And that shows that the club are quite willing and quite open to build and to bring along a women's section, which is very close to my own heart. I'm actually involved with them at the moment in coaching. I took off the blazer and put the boots back on again. But it's great to see, and it's great to see the friendships, no more than Steve back in his day, the friendships that are being nurtured with the girls and lads out here. And it's great to see the success of this year. We have our under 18s and our under 14s in the league finals this weekend, and I wish the lads all the best on the pitch. Hopefully they'll bring back the silver, but to be honest, it's not all about silver. It's about the friendships. It's about contacts you make over the years out here. And it's great to see the likes of Steve and all our sponsors here that have come back, to Steve with Sherry FitzGerald, to come back to Corinthians and give back. It just shows his thoughts of what the club is here, what he's got from the club, how it's developed him and all the other young people in Galway. And it's fantastic to see a company of the stature of Sherry FitzGerald coming and giving sponsorship to the youth section here.